Welcome to the Lawless Astrology channel. My name is Dabney Lawless and I am an evolutionary astrologer. Today we're going to be doing something a little different. If you watch my channel somewhat regularly, you know that I am a bit of a history buff. I am not a historian. My degree was in anthropology, but I love history. And when it comes to mundane astrology, I think looking back at what has happened in history can help inform what's going to be happening to us now, like the things that we're going through with the planetary energies. So history doesn't repeat, it rhymes, they say. And I think that's true. And I don't think that we can, with 100% certainty, know what's coming down the pike, but I think that we can have some really good guesses based on what's happened in the past. So this video is all about Pluto and Aquarius. And so if that interests you, I hope you stick around and you hear a little bit about what has happened during previous Pluto and Aquarius cycles and how that can inform what's going to happen in this one. So as always, please like, subscribe, and share. And I hope you stick around and watch my video. Okay, everybody. So if you've ever watched that show on Comedy Central, I don't think it's around anymore, but it was called Drunk History, and they would get people drunk and then they would recount historical events. I am not drunk, but I am also not a historian. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about Pluto and Aquarius throughout history, and I'm going to highlight a few examples that I think are very pertinent to what's happening now in our society. And hopefully that'll inform us about what we can expect in the years to come. So Pluto, every time it gets through the zodiac, it heads into Pluto and Aquarius. It has had its precursor in Pluto and Capricorn. And we've talked a lot about how Pluto and Capricorn throughout history, it ushers in corruption. It ushers in sort of late stages of the people in power getting greedier, and there's like a lot of wealth inequality that comes to the surface, and people start to realize that this is not okay. And so that's pretty consistent throughout history. And we're going to talk about how Pluto and Aquarius really always ushers in some kind of revolution. And sometimes it's a bloody revolution and sometimes it's a very peaceful revolution. But either way, society has grown stagnant. Something is broken. The ruling class is out of control and the masses are not having it anymore. And so one of the things that I think myself and a lot of astrologers got wrong with the election predictions, first of all, let's just be really clear. It was 50-50. And, you know, we were dealing with somebody who is very shady. So assuming everything's on the up and up, what I will say is the actual election was Pluto and Capricorn. And I think we did have a Pluto and Aquarius choice that was a little bit gentler. But in some ways, this was always going to be a referendum on the ruling class. And people were ready for change and upheaval, no matter what the consequences. And so I really had hoped that it would be our first woman of color president who was proposing some tremendously progressive social programs that really could have helped turn things on its head a little more gently. But that's not what we're getting. And so let's look throughout history at the moment in time. And there have been several leaders that have come up during Pluto and Capricorn that stayed leaders in Pluto and Aquarius, which is really what we are going to be having. And two of the examples that I'm going to highlight that I think very analogous to the incoming administration is Nero, the Roman Emperor Nero. And even more analogous, I think, is King Henry VIII. And so we're going to talk a lot about those two, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell you kind of all of the different cycles of Pluto in Aquarius and just kind of give you the highlight of what changed in society, just to give us some understanding of what's coming. Now, one of the things that myself and a lot of astrologers really focused on was that The previous Pluto and Aquarius cycle brought the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the Industrial Revolution. So democracy seemed to be a big theme. What I didn't realize, and that is one of the reasons I went back to kind of look through history, where Pluto and Aquarius has, produced kind of more fair and equitable societies. Neptune was in Libra. And so I think that's really important. And also the French Revolution was a very bloody revolution. And Pluto and Aquarius was opposing Uranus and Uranus and Leo. Very different energy than Uranus and Gemini. So I'm going to kind of break all this down and put it into English, but I just want you to know that we might be looking at something a little different this time. But what is not going to be different is that society is going to change radically. The ruling class will no longer be the ruling class when things are all settled, but it may be very painful. It may be a big, long process. Pluto is in Aquarius for 20 years. This may not happen next week. But we do have a little light at the end of the tunnel because this summer there's some really beautiful interaction between all of the outer planets as they change signs. So that's something that I'm going to do another video about. And then I also have a 2-part series coming out with Ronnie Pontiac that I hope you watch and listen to. So again, if I didn't say this, please like, subscribe, and share. It does help me with the algorithm when I get comments and people are interacting with the video. And I just want to say I'm very grateful for everybody that watches this channel. So forgive me if I'm reading a little bit here and there, but I did do a lot of research, and I hope that this video is enlightening and gives you a little bit more comfort and also awareness to be prepared for what's on the horizon. So let's kick it off. All right, so 54 to 68 AD, Nero was the leader, and he came into power during Pluto in Capricorn, and Neptune was in Aries for that one. So this is, I think, an analogous one to some degree. So Rome was the big dog in town. They had this giant empire, and they had become kind of like overwhelmingly powerful, and they had become somewhat oppressive. And Nero's henchmen, his military, was a little bit out of control. And the Celtic queen Boudica, she was a warrior queen. She led an uprising against Rome. Unfortunately, she was killed, but this was a big deal because basically they were fighting back and saying no more. And so it really did sow the seeds of all of the chaos that was ensuing behind closed doors in Rome. Nero was a malignant narcissist. He was a man-child. He was somebody who is rumored to have killed his mother. He killed his wife. He was very spoiled and very immature, and he really didn't want to be the Roman emperor. He really wanted to be an actor. And what was interesting, and there's kind of definitely some parallels to the incoming administration, is this man was not only a man-child, but he was actually loved by the masses because he would kind of go out there and pretend to be a charioteer. And he would kind of like the same way, who goes out and like pretends like he's in a UFC fight or WWF. Like it's that kind of like, playing to the masses. And he would have these bold declarations that he was eliminating taxes and that everyone was going to just have this awesome life and that he was for the poor man. But at the same time, he was, incredibly greedy and selfish and really just a big baby. And like people around him could not stand him. So the ruling class, the ruling elite, and the Congress just, the Senate hated him. But they knew that he was loved by the masses. So some resonance with what's happening today. it was interesting. So they tried to keep him in line. And it was one of these things that people felt like they could manipulate him. And they felt like there was all these kind of internal warring, like to get close to him and give him everything he wanted. And, he pretty much almost bankrupted the entire empire with, promising no taxes and wars that just didn't go well. And this uprising from the masses, far flung in like London or England and Ireland. So anyway, point being, there was all sorts of drama. It was just drama central, constantly infighting, jockeying for position. And, basically like he surrounded himself, like originally he had people that gave him good advice and things were kind of under control. But as time went on, his power grew and he felt invincible. He would just, have these bold declarations. And if people, if they didn't do what he said, then they were out. They, they would be, arrested or killed. And then, loyalists, more yes men, he'd be surrounded by these kind of crazy yes men who would just do whatever he wanted, till the point where everything got really broken. And then there was this giant fire, and that's where Nero was fiddling while Rome was burning. Probably didn't literally happen, but the whole thing is he was a musician and an artist, and that was what he wanted. He was this very dramatic character, and he really had no governing ability. He was not a leader in any sense of the manner. And so eventually, no matter who it was, they would have to say no to him because it was so outlandish, and then they would be gone. And so eventually the army turned on him, and then he committed suicide, or he had someone kill him because he was too much of a coward. But he was incredibly insecure. But what's fascinating is the masses still loved him. And there was a big contingency of people that just loved him, to the point where after his death, there was a lot of upheaval. And so Nero really brought about kind of the breaking of the power of the Senate of Rome. And so there was all these different emperors that didn't last long in quick succession, because they had to have kind of a new mythology. They had to have a new leadership. But even 100 years later, people were saying that they were the reincarnation of Nero to take advantage of that popularity. So as much as we'd like to be rid of he who shall not be named, it might not be happening anytime soon. So, okay. So that was Neptune in Aries. That was one of the ones that I felt like had some good resonance with what's happening today. The thing that I want you to understand about Pluto and Aquarius, no matter when it was, it really does bring in some kind of revolution. I think that is one of the biggest things that, I want you to have a takeaway. And the revolutions happen in all different kinds of ways. And I'm going to be talking about what I think the flavor of this revolution is going to be about. Okay. Next, we're not going to talk too long about each one of these. I'm going to go into Henry VIII for a little bit longer because I think that's a big one. But 305 to 329, Neptune is in Libra and Uranus is in Sagittarius. And we have the Emperor Constantine, who says, Christianity's cool. I am Christian now. This is a big shakeup, okay? This is huge. So up until this time, the Roman Empire was a pagan society and Christians had been persecuted. You didn't want to be, out and Christian during the Roman times until Constantine came in with Pluto and Aquarius and said, hey, it's cool to be Christian. I'm Christian. I'm anointed by God. God chose me. And so then Christianity began spreading. He is the beginning of Christianity spreading throughout Europe. And so he is the one that took pagan holidays and said, okay, we don't want this to be like a bloody revolution. So we're going to kind of try to find common ground here. And we're going to say, this is Christmas. And, he took, the pagan holiday Saturnalia, and he made that into Christmas. And Easter, likewise, was a pagan celebration of spring and fertility. And so he kind of was easing people into this being a new way of looking at the world. Jesus at that time was portrayed much more like a youthful, the sun god Apollo. And he was kind of benevolent, and, it wasn't this like hanging on a cross situation. That all came much, much later. He was kind of like the fun god that, we're like, oh, we like that Jesus guy. So early portrayals of Jesus are just like very youthful, and really tried to make him align more with the pagan god Apollo. So just kind of an interesting factoid there. Okay. So 795 to 819. So again, let me just quick go back. Neptune in Libra, Uranus in Sagittarius. Neptune in Libra finds balance. Okay. So there was an equality element there where it was like, okay, we're killing a lot of, Christians. Let's do this differently. And then Uranus in Sag, change in religion. Okay. Sag has to do with religion and beliefs. Okay. 795, 819. Neptune and Uranus are both in Libra. Big, big, big. This was Charlemagne's reign. So Charlemagne was emperor in the Middle Ages, and he really did a lot to codify Germanic law, like all these different tribal things. He kind of brought people together. He was big for universities. He created a university. He was big for the arts. It was really kind of a golden period under Charlemagne, and he publicly funded schools for children of the elite and future clergy. Poor people that wasn't even a thing to like have them go to school, but like to have like kind of the elite like have these public schools. Was a big deal. So, so literacy really increased under Charlemagne. And so he really did change the way things were done, but it was in a much gentler way than the Neptune and Aries kind of situation. Okay, 1041 to 1063, there is a big schism between Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches. Both become permanent. So this is Neptune and Aries as well. And so what ends up happening is, each one of these times that Pluto comes back around in Aquarius, we see what has been the ruling or the law of the land, or like the thing that emerged as the leadership gets too big for its britches. And so in this case, the two churches, the church was one, it was too big for its britches and it divided. So that's what happened during that period. 1286 to 1308, lots of inventions, and this was Neptune in Libra. I'm going to go through this one pretty quickly, but I think what's fascinating is in Britain, the House of Lords and Commons were founded, and Parliament gained the right for taxation. So that's important. So now here's the big one that I really wanted to focus on. Was 1532 to 1533. Neptune is also again in Aries. The Protestant Reformation and King Henry VIII. So a lot of you may know who King Henry VIII is for having a lot of wives and chopping off their heads. That is a fascinating part of this man's life, but that is not all of his legacy. And so let's talk about King Henry VIII's legacy. This is a man who was an incredibly malignant narcissist. He was a golden child. He was a bit of a playboy. He was born into the monarchy. He was born into wealth, obviously. He was considered a real catch in a lot of ways. And he was, kind of a man about town, famous king, right? He came to the throne early in life, but he was incredibly insecure. And he married Catherine of Aragon, his first wife, and unfortunately she had a daughter, but she had several miscarriages and was not able to give him a male heir. Well, that was all he cared about. That was the most important thing to Henry, was carrying on the lineage. And at that time for royalty, that was a big deal to have a male heir. So as time went on and she had more and more miscarriages, he decided that the marriage was cursed and he wanted a divorce. His right-hand man at the time was Cardinal Wolsey. And so Cardinal Wolsey, this was a man who was whispering in the king's ear. So there were a lot of people that whisper in the king's ear. And so Cardinal Wolsey whispers in the king's ear about this and that and, what's going on. And he was not able to secure the divorce decree from the Pope. The Pope said, that's not a reason to get a divorce. You're out of luck. You know, she's a queen. She's a good wife. Sorry, she didn't cheat on you. Like, you're out of luck. So, lo and behold, Cardinal Wolsey was out because he displeased the king. And that's what happens with a lot of these malignant narcissists, is they surround themselves with people who think they can get ahead and who whisper in their ear and want their own agendas heard. But in the end, they ultimately pay the ultimate price for their agenda. So while he was with his wife, he caught the eye of Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn was a society girl who I believe she was one of the queen's attendants. And so she was incredibly bright. She was well educated, and she was a fan of the Protestant Reformation taking place. Now, this had not fully caught on in the way that it would. So Martin Luther basically challenged the Catholic Church and said, hey, this is so messed up what you're doing. You're basically saying only rich people can go to heaven. So the Catholic Church at this point had gained so much power, right? 248 years later, at this point, the Catholic Church has this unbreakable grip on everyone, and it's become incredibly greedy and horrible. And they had these things called indulgences. And so basically the only way to get into heaven was to basically pay your way in, or to do these acts of service that only really rich people could do. And so that's it. You had to be rich to get into heaven. And so Martin Luther, the famous, put his stuff on the door and was like, no way. And so that was catching on around Europe. So Anne Boleyn was in favor of the Protestant Reformation, as was Thomas Cromwell. And so Thomas Cromwell was kind of like the Steve Bannon of today. Like, he was kind of a troublemaker. He was kind of an a-hole. But he had a mission. Like, he wanted to destroy things. Like, that was it. He felt like it was broken, and he wanted to, help the king, really tear it all down. And so that's what he did. He kind of said, well, here's what we can do. We can have you declare that you are the rightful anointed one, and that you have all the power, not the Catholic Church, because you're royalty. You've been picked by God. And so that's what Henry did. He basically gave the middle finger to the Pope, got a divorce, married Anne Boleyn, and said, I'm all supreme now. God said, I'm the supreme one. And so he went and he raided all the churches and the monasteries, and he killed a lot of monks. I mean, it's just really sad. But it also was they were the corruption of the day. And so it really was kind of this really shocking thing at the time. And he pillaged all of the money from the Catholic Church around England. And so that really fed his coffers quite a bit. So Anne Boleyn was not able to have a male heir. She had a daughter named Elizabeth, but she subsequently continued to have miscarriages as well. And so the king got fed up with her, and he said she had an affair with her brother, which didn't happen, and off with her head. And then he got married again, and then off with their heads. And so that sort of thing continued to happen. So here we have this incredibly selfish, malignant narcissist who does not care about governing. He only cares about himself and his legacy. And he's like a showman. All right. So it sounds like somebody that we're all familiar with, right? And people said that he was obese, he was crude. He died at 55, but there's a belief that he had tremendous body odor. He was really disgusting to be around. He had open sores. The medicine of the day obviously is nothing like today. And so, he was really kind of like this disgusting figure. And people just continued to think that they could manipulate him for their own power and their own gain. He did have one wife who gave him a male heir, but she died shortly after, days after, hours after, something like that. And when Henry died at 55, he had really set off the Protestant Reformation. He had really solidified it. And so he had 2 female daughters and a male heir, Edward. When he died, Edward became king, but he died a few weeks later, I think. I'm not a historian. I can't remember if it's a few weeks or like a year, but he died shortly after taking the throne. Then Mary, Catherine of Aragon's daughter, who was Catholic, took over. And then she died. So then you got Queen Elizabeth, who was Protestant. And so here we had like this huge flourishing of Protestant power. And so it's interesting because the Elizabethan times were this beautiful time of Renaissance. However, it was also a time of increased power for Europe and England because they, the slave trade. And they started pillaging and, this is another little aside, but this is all Pluto and Aquarius, Neptune and Aries. So it's important to understand these things. So this was also the time that the Spanish went and overthrew the Incan Empire. And the Spanish were invading the Incans, taking all of their gold and destroying their culture during Pluto and Aquarius. While their ships were coming back, Henry, back in the day, before Elizabeth had taken over, Henry had taken all the Catholic Church's money and he had put it into creating a royal navy. So they had this like really badass navy. So then Elizabeth takes the navy and sticks it on the Spanish when they're coming back with all the gold from England and steals that. Wow. Okay. All of this is happening during Pluto and Aquarius. So here we see once again, like first, this under Nero, the Senate had too much power. And so Rome and the empire just kind of busts open and there's like a time of chaos. They rebuilt and it wasn't the fall of the Roman Empire, but you can sort of see where like that happened. And then we think about Charlemagne coming in and Constantine saying, okay, this empire is too big and the paganism's out of control. We got to have Christianity. And then the Christians become too powerful, so they have to break apart. And then, the Catholic Church, which was the one that became dominant, became too powerful. And so then, here we have the Protestant Reformation, and here we have this unwitting, narcissistic, selfish beast who is the one who actually, through his selfish means and all the people whispering in his ear, is the vehicle for which the Protestant Reformation crushes the stranglehold of the Catholic Church on Europe. And then that also then leads to the, stealing of the gold from the Incans. I mean, this is all just craziness, right? Okay, so when the most recent one, and this is the one, also during this time, which is interesting, we have Copernicus, but we also have Machiavelli's The Prince. And it was about how to get away with unethical practices and wielding power. And it was published in 1532. And so what a time that was, right? Like crazy that finally, like, there's a whole book about how to be a narcissist and like how to get your way and just wield power. Like, and that came out under Pluto and Aquarius. So it's like under Pluto and Capricorn, we start to feel the impacts of all these things, but under Pluto and Aquarius, it's just like, it's here and we're not going to take it anymore. Okay. Then we have the American Revolution. So Pluto and Aquarius, 1777 through 1797, while Uranus was also in Gemini, which is what we're going to be having. But Neptune was in Libra. So kind of interesting energy. So we have some resonance. We do definitely have some resonance, but Neptune was in Libra. And also during the French Revolution, the incredibly bloody French Revolution with the guillotine and everything, you had Pluto and Aquarius opposite Uranus in Leo, because that was later in And so that's very different energy too. But the resonance piece is, and I think this is where a lot of us astrologers were like, well, democracy is going to win out. And that's the most important thing, because last time democracy was the most important thing. That was the thing that spread. But what I think we missed, and what I missed, is this bigger picture of every time it comes in, it has to crush what has gotten too big. And it has to be a revolution against the ruling power. And so I do believe that he who should not be named is Pluto in Capricorn, and all the people surrounding him and what they're saying they want is Pluto in Capricorn. Do not mistake that. And that is when the election took place. But the last one, so King Henry VIII destroyed the stranglehold of the Catholic Church. And then he made the monarchy the most important thing, especially when Elizabeth got all that gold. So then we have the revolution of America, and we have the revolution in France. And basically they were like, no more monarchy. We are not putting up with this BS anymore. And so they toppled the power of the monarchy and began to spread democracy and more power to the people. But along with that, in America came capitalism. And so the ruling power, the unintended consequence of what ended up happening is we have these corporations that are completely out of control because it's gone too far. And that's who owns, they always say like the biggest buildings, the grand churches, right? During the medieval time when Catholicism was the big thing, like you have these grand giant churches that you could see from everywhere. And then it became the royal palaces once they had all the gold and took over. Well, who has all the gold now is the corporations and the shareholders. And that's why we have these big skyscrapers, right? So that's the thing that we have to understand, that Pluto in Aquarius is coming to say, we're going to do things differently. So something else is going to emerge. So I think with Uranus and Gemini, we're going to see tremendous inventions, and we're going to see things that we can't even imagine right now. Like, who knows what's coming? Because, we think that we can predict the future and be, godlike, but we're not. And that's the whole thing with Pluto and Aquarius too, is we want to get closer to, society being godlike, but we're not God. There is something bigger out there that's kind of pulling the strings on a lot of this, and we can't even imagine what's coming. And so I do think that, like the other day, a CEO was gunned down in Manhattan of United Healthcare. No matter what you think about that, that to me, the first thing I thought about was, wow, that is so Pluto and Aquarius. Because here is the symbol. Like, what is more greedy and horrible? And I'm not talking about this man particularly. I do not know this man, but I can only extrapolate from my own experiences with United Healthcare, which have been completely antithetical to anything resembling human care. and I have a lot of things I can say about United Healthcare. And so this man, as the CEO, is the symbol of United Healthcare. He's the CEO. He is the top. And the top of one of the greediest institutions in our country just got gunned down. That is, to me, Pluto and Aquarius. So as much as the new incoming administration thinks they have a mandate, what they have a mandate over is what the populace wants. That's it. And what the populace wants is actually what the two sides, the Democrats and the Republicans, actually want is a lot closer to each other than what they would have us believe. And by they, I mean the government, the ruling factions, the corporations, the billionaires. I believe that he who should not be named has 9 billionaires now in his cabinet that he's nominated. That matters. That's what tells me this is not going to go well. This is what's coming, is the breaking of the billionaire class. They have gone too far, and that's what's coming. And so this is going to be a 20-year situation. I do see the beginning of this year being very challenging and a lot of chaos, a lot of upheaval. I did a 2-part series with Ronnie Pontiac, and we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about that and the Pluto opposing Mars. And so there's a lot of things coming that are sort of indicating like, whoa, shock, like things are changing fast. But then in the summer, something really beautiful happens, and there's this really nice outer planet trine and sextiles, and when everything starts to flip over. So I don't know exactly what that's going to be about. I think I'm going to have a better intuition about it the closer we get, and I'm going to be right there with you explaining it all. But what I think for this particular Pluto in Aquarius that we can anticipate is the breaking of this stranglehold that the corporations have on our society across the world. Citizens United was the final straw that kind of broke the camel's back. And that's the thing, like, you know, us serfs, us like working class people, us like normal, whatever, like even the bourgeoisie, like us just everyday people, we'll put up with a lot from the ruling class. Like, we just want to live our lives. We just want to raise our children. We want to be healthy. We want to have food on the table. We want to have vacations a couple times a year. We want to have a nice home. You know, we want like the basics, right? We don't need private jets. In most cases, none of us want that, right? You know, I would like to fly first class someday, but like that's because the airlines have gotten so horrible because of the greedy airline CEOs. So that's a whole other story. But my point being is, once politics became so infected with money and corporations became people, that was kind of like the indulgences in the Roman Catholic Church. It was kind of just a bunch of like, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. It's just, you've gone too far. And so now the going too far is going to come home to roost. And that's what I think Pluto in Aquarius is going to be about. And how that will manifest, it could manifest in a lot of different ways. And will it involve pain? Absolutely. And I think it involved a lot of pain throughout history. If you look at all these examples, you know, I think when Neptune is in Libra, it seems to be a little nicer. But you have to look at the whole big picture, and you have to look at the outer planets. And that's why there's a little bit of hope that the outer planets are going to be singing nicely together this summer. And there is some hope. There really is some hope for a flowering. But the pain that's going to come, how do we break up these corporations? You know, is it that we start to create tariffs and we have mass deportations? I mean, like what they're saying they want to do. And what they're saying they want to do ultimately could crush the backs of the corporations. Because when people have, you know, if you crush the economy and you have no money to go buy anything, no one's going to Target and spending $200 on stuff they don't need when there are tremendous tariffs. You know, so the shareholder needs suddenly don't become as important when everything's tanking. So that's one potential manifestation. And I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying that could be something that then they go too far to the point where they hurt themselves, and then they have to say, okay, something has to change. How do we change this? Or, you know, this administration becomes so toxic that both sides come together to get them out. In which case, then new laws are made. So there's a lot of different ways that this can happen, whether it's probably going to be painful in the beginning. There's just no doubt about it. And it didn't have to be this way, but as humans, sometimes it does. We have a lot of lessons to learn collectively, and like we have to have some patience for the fact that this is a necessary purging of the ruling billionaire class. And how that's going to happen, we're going to see. But that was an interesting portend of the future, to have the CEO, the head of one of the greediest companies in the country, gunned down. So, you know, it's not the guillotine, but that's interesting. Just saying, just putting it out there, food for thought, not advocating, not saying, you know, he didn't have redeeming qualities, but I doubt he did. But, you know, then again, I don't know. I don't know. Everyone has redeeming qualities. Probably even, apparently King Henry VIII was, quite the sportsman when he was young. So everyone's got redeeming qualities. All right, what else do I want to say? I had written a couple things down. Aquarius represents the need for civilization to reform and grow. This is from an astrologer, Jessica Davidson, in the UK. The structures of society will stagnate and decline if they're not changed through vision, innovation, and revolution. This process isn't always positive and can create unintended consequences that lead to disintegration and chaos. That's a mouthful, but I think that's true when you look throughout history. This is why utopian visions descend into dystopia, and revolutions never end well. And you see that often. Like, you look at the Russian Revolution, like they had this kind of utopian idea, and people are power hungry, and then it really falls apart. So, there are consequences. And I believe in karma. So I think people have got some karma coming to them. So this is not about how you personally can get through this time. This is really much more about, what I think will happen collectively, why I think this is happening, what the evolutionary purpose of this time is. And hopefully it was a cool history lesson. I'm not a historian, so if I got some things slightly wrong, you feel free to let me know. But just know that I'm just doing my best, doing some research and trying to kind of correlate the history, and know that we are going to be having Uranus and Gemini, which we will do a video on this summer, or even closer to the summer. We're also going to have Neptune and Aries, which does portend kind of a warlike energy. Uranus and Gemini can as well. So I don't know if that's civil war. I don't know if that's war with other nations, but the bottom line is we're always at war. There's war going on right now. I think the fascinating thing for me is the war against the ruling class and what this revolution will ultimately produce, which is something that I don't think we yet know. So, okay, I appreciate your time, and happy Pluto and Aquarius. I actually am excited for this energy because things have gotten really broken, and as much as we, want certain things to stay the same, certain things need to get wrapped up. So, as always, please like, subscribe, and share, and I'm grateful for your time. Till next time, stargazers.